Hey boys and girls, good to see you back here again this week. I'm still a little upset and bummed out that we can't be meeting in person again, but that's okay. I love that we have the technology to be able to meet together over the internet, for me to shoot a video and still be able to get a lesson out to you just like we were in children's church. And so we're not going to waste any time this week. We are going to get right into our lesson on the books of the Bible. If you remember last week, we talked about the books of the law. Books of law. And those are the first 5 books in the Old Testament. And so let's go through those together just real quick to make sure you remember them. Here we go. It's Genesis, Exodus. Let's see here. There's Genesis and Exodus, and then guys, I think I forgot them. Man, I really thought I had them down, and now I just can't get them to come to my mind. I think I forgot the first 5 books of the Bible. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't forget them. That was a big joke. Let's go through them for real fast. Here we go. The first 5 books of the Bible are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and those are the books of law. Now, I played a little joke there. I told you I forgot them, and I really didn't, but I have to admit, there are a lot of times that I do forget things. I forget a lot of stuff all the time. Just ask Miss Liz. I'll be doing something and she'll ask me about something, or she'll ask me to do something, and it seems like right after she gets done talking sometimes, I completely forget what she asked me to do. And it's really frustrating. It's really upsetting. And with my job, there are things that I have to remember that I can't forget. If I forget, there will be a lot of people that are in trouble. So there are a lot of things that I've figured out I have to do to help me not forget. And maybe your parents do some of these, maybe you do some of them for your schoolwork or for anything you have going on. The first thing that I like to do is use something called Post-it notes. I use sticky notes, and I write stuff on sticky notes at work, and I'll put it in places where I'll see it so I don't forget about what I need to do. Another thing that I like to use is a planner. I use a planner, and I have a big old planner because I have a lot of things that have to go on my schedule all the time. Like you can see from this past week, I had things every single day of the week that I had to remember. I couldn't forget about them, or else I would get in big trouble with my job. And the last thing that I use, one of the last things that I use all the time to help me not forget things, is my phone. Our technology that we have is so awesome today. I use my calendar on my phone. I even use my timer on my phone if I'm cooking some food at my house and I put it in the oven and I don't want to forget about it. I have to set a timer so I don't just leave it in there and it gets burnt. It's really upsetting when that happens, and I don't want it to happen. And so I use my phone as a timer. And so you can see that I have to do a lot of things to help me not forget about things. And you can say, well, what does that have anything to do with what we're talking about? Well, it has a lot to do with our next section of the Bible. The next section of the Bible, and that is the books of history. Everybody say, the books of history. That's right. And so these are the next 12 books in the Bible. I know that seems like a lot longer list than just the 5 that we did with the books of law, but the books of history, I think you guys can learn these really well. So let's say the next 12 books of the Bible altogether. We've already done the 5 in the books of law, but the books of history is Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. That's the next 12 books of the Bible, and those are the books of history. What are they again? That's right, the books of history. And so they have a lot to do with forgetting. So if you remember, in the books of law, we talked all about the beginning of the story of Jesus. And we talked about how God created everything that we know that we have. God created everything that we have. He was the creator, and He made it all. And then we went on to talk about how God made promises to his people. And not only did God make promises, but then he gave them laws, rules that he wanted them to follow. And that was the beginning of the story of Jesus. And so now we move on, and this is the books of history are all about God's chosen people. Who are who? What were God's chosen people called? That's right, the Israelites. The Israelites, they had forgotten about God's promises and his laws. They forgot about them. It was really, really sad. God did so many things for them in those beginning books. And then when we get to the books of history, we see over and over again how the Israelites forget about what God had done for them. They don't follow his laws anymore. They don't do the things that he wanted them to do. And it's really, really sad. So I want to talk to you specifically about one little verse in all of these books, in the books of history. And it's the first one in this section. It's the book of Joshua. And you see, Joshua, he took over as leader of the Israelites once Moses had died. Moses was chosen by God to lead the Israelites, but before they made it to the promised land, Moses died. And so Joshua took over as leader of the Israelites, led them into the promised land. But toward the end of his book, toward the end of the book of Joshua, we see that the Israelites had already forgotten about what God did for them. Guys, it's really, really sad. They had forgotten about his promises and his laws and all the miracles he did for them during the time when they were in the wilderness. And so Joshua comes out, this is right before he dies, and he gathers together all the people of Israel. It's probably millions of people. He gets them all together and he gives them a big long speech about how they have to choose who they want to serve. They can choose the gods of the world like they've been doing, or they can remember about what God had done for them, about the laws he made, and choose to serve God. So he gets up and he makes this big proclamation that they have to choose, and all of the Israelites said, oh, we want to serve the one true God. We want to follow his rules. We want to remember all the things he did for us. And so Joshua it says he gets a big stone and he puts it up and makes a statue out of it and puts it up, and then he gives them one little last part of his speech, and I want to read that. It's in Joshua 24:27. Just listen to what Joshua says. It says, Joshua said to all the people, behold, this stone shall be for a witness against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord which he has spoke to us. Thus it shall be for a witness against you, so that you do not deny your God. It says that, well, I'm putting up this statue so that we can always remember that we didn't want to deny our God, so that we never forget. And then the Israelites went on and they lived happily ever after. Sadly, that's not quite how the rest of the story goes. That's not quite how the rest of our books of history even go. You see, the Israelites, they said they didn't want to forget. They said they wanted to serve God, but just a little bit later, they completely forgot about God's laws and his promises all over again. And throughout the rest of the books of history, we see over and over and over again the Israelites forgot about God's laws. They kept forgetting. But that's not the main point of the books of history. You see, the main point is that no matter how many times the Israelites forgot, God never stopped loving them. He never stopped loving them. Just like me and you, when we forget about what God has told us he wants us to do, God never stops loving us. And why this is important to Jesus' story, to the whole Bible, is because God loved them so much. He loves me and you so much that eventually he sent someone to come and die on the cross for our sins, even though we forget about him a lot. And I think everyone knows who that was. You guys go ahead and tell me, who was that God sent? That's right, he sent Jesus to die on the cross for our sins. And so throughout these books of history, these 12 books, the next group of books that we're talking about, the Israelites, God's chosen people, forgot over and over again about what God did for them. But we can know that God never stopped loving them. And he loved them so much that eventually he sent Jesus to come to the earth and die for their sins and for our sins. And so that's what I want us to remember about the books of history. Over this next week, take your coloring page and fill in those next 12 books, the books of history. Color those in and take time to learn them. Take time to memorize them so that you can know which 12 books are the books of history, and that you can remember that no matter how many times the Israelites forgot, no matter how many times we forget, God still loves us so much. And so that's the next part of the story of Jesus, is the books of history. So I want to thank all of you for watching and for listening again this week, and we'll be back next week to talk more about the story of Jesus.